So we've all been forewarned that we're being recorded. Thank you, Janice. I'm Deanne DeRoyne. I am the co-chair of the Tribal Health Summit Planning Committee, along with Zach Pomami, vice chair of the Prairie Band Potawatomi Tribal Council. And our coordinator, Tiffany Lewis, is with us, as are a couple of our board members today, Olivia Puamo, actually three of them, Janice Simon and Elizabeth Stewart Berger, and other guests, which we are delighted to have. And we are very, very happy to have our speaker today. Our guest is Daniel Goombay. And Goombay is Daniel is the Chief Executive Officer of a new organization based in Holton on the east side of the square called the Midwest Native Coalition for Justice and Peace. And he's going to be telling us all about his organization, which is just about a year old. And he has some very important services to bring to our communities. Now, Daniel is a self-described Haskell rascal. I knew his grandparents years ago when I was a doctor at Haskell. And so he's been in this area for a long time. He knows of our communities, and so he is well prepared to work with us, and we hope that he'll become a partner. It's all yours, Daniel.
All right, I'm going to see if I could share my screen. And okay.
Yeah, got it.
You got it. Okay. So, first off, I'd like to thank you all. I'm from Oklahoma, so I say y'all. I apologize. Thank you all for having me today. It's just I'm always happy, one, to talk about our organization, but then more importantly, how we want to assist and help advocate within our tribal communities across Kansas, and really honor our commitment to serving our tribal people, especially when it comes to addressing various traumas, including sexual assault, domestic violence, family violence, and stalking. Now I'm going to start off by saying some of the topics I bring up might be a little bit sensitive because it's dealing with some very serious subject matter that we deal with as service professionals a lot within our tribal communities. And so my intent is to share some resources, talk about organization, some of the things that are going on in Kansas, but ultimately just support the great work that y'all are doing as an organization and as representation of these tribal communities. And so I'll also go ahead and kind of warn you. When I speak in general terms of survivors and victims, I often refer to more females, Native American females, just because statistically we've seen that they're impacted at a higher rate when it comes to addressing domestic violence and sexual assault. I do not diminish or minimize the impact on Native American men as survivors and as victims. And so I just speak in general terms, and it's just kind of common language in this field. And so, yeah, I acknowledge and hope that we can address violence to both men and women in our tribal communities. So, like I said, I am the executive director for Midwest Native Coalition for Justice and Peace. We are a newer nonprofit to Kansas. We actually started about a year ago during the pandemic. That was exciting. And so having to fight the IRS to become a nonprofit, that was pretty challenging, but we're thankfully past that. We are a grant-funded organization through the Department of Justice, Office on Violence Against Women. We are a tribal coalition. There's 19 coalitions across the United States. And so ultimately, we're a resource for tribal communities here in Kansas, for the tribes that are implementing victim response programs through OVW. And so, yeah, we're here to be a resource, and we're going to talk a little bit about that here in a second. So our organization, like I said, we are finishing up our first year of funding. We are a predominantly grant funded organization. The funding that we receive as an organization is specific to tribal coalitions, so programs like us. The resources that we implement do not take away from funding or resources that are available to tribes. So we're very intentional in making sure that we do not compete, or we do not take away some resources that are much needed in our tribal communities to implement direct services for survivors and victims. Our organization is pretty small. It's myself and two others. My office manager is Jennifer Hale. She has experience working with tribes in management. She's the details. So yeah, she keeps me running, and I appreciate the hard work that she does. My outreach manager is Corinne Lang. Corey Lang. She has about 9 years of work as a court administrator. So a lot of experience when it comes to tribal courts and offering services and resources and implementing various tribal policies and law and order. So like I said, we're pretty informal as an organization. We love to just invest ourselves into our work, into our tribal communities that we serve. But then also we understand some of the challenges and the serious natures of the conversations we're having. And so we try to find ways to just to celebrate the great things that are happening, or just to reach out and speak with wonderful organizations like y'all and find ways to really connect. We are on the east side of the square in Holton. And so if you're in the area, please swing by. We'd love to have you. I'm pretty excited to say that we are 100% vaccinated. And so we still try to social distance and wear masks as much as possible just to support the community. Our area, our service area is all of Kansas. And so obviously there's 4 tribes in Northeast Kansas that are fairly recognized and have tribal communities. Each of those tribes have direct services. 3 of them have victim advocacy services and programs that are up and running. And then we are actually been talking to Kickapoo, the social services director, as they are starting some advocacy components as well. And so we want to be a resource for all 4 tribes. We recognize that there's tribal communities besides those tribes that are equally important and need just as much support. And so we want to, as we look towards the future, grow in supporting not only the tribes, but our urban populations, because we recognize that we have wonderful communities in Lawrence and Kansas City and Topeka and Wichita that are full of tribal people and people that might need some advocacy services and resources to help if they need to have some support. Like I said earlier, we are a tribal coalition. There's actually 19 coalitions across the United States. I have no idea why our star is way down here. I think that's kind of where Pratt is. I have no idea why, but we're in Holton. And so we're kind of centrally located within the tribal communities. And so, yeah, there's 19 coalitions. We are tasked with providing technical assistance and support for tribal communities within our state. Technical assistance can be very broad. And so with that, we want to support existing programs with any type of advocacy training, any type of system-based work, resources, if they are trying to, one, develop resources and need funding. We are pretty creative in trying to track that down. If there's specific topics that they're wanting to address or program components that they want to implement, our staff is committed to being as helpful as we can in tracking down resources, tracking down trainings. And if we can't find it for you, then we will find somebody that can. One thing we're really excited for is once we get past our COVID restrictions and we are able to be more involved in the communities directly, we are wanting to develop on-site trainings and resources to where we could come to the community and provide trainings on specific topics or just general victimization and advocacy work. We are looking towards the opportunity to develop a 2-day training, probably next year, the beginning of next year, to where we want to do a 2-day training addressing our justice systems and how they respond to sexual assault survivors. And so as we get towards that, you'll hear more information, but we're hoping to do on-site training for 2 days, bring in our justice system partners, our tribal courts, our judges, our law enforcement, to be able to have these trainers that can come in, that do national trainings, but have it brought in to where we could provide that for our tribes here in Kansas. So thankfully we have resources to where we could provide these trainings at no cost to our tribes, at no cost to our communities. And it's a way for us to really support the great things that are happening, but then also to encourage our systems to really focus on how we could be more victim-centered in our responses. So a big part of our technical assistance is linking up our tribes or our tribal communities with resources. Now, I know when I go to trainings, or when we used to go to trainings, I would always look for the information that I could write down and take back with me. This is where you want to pay attention. These are 2 of my favorite websites. And so let's go ahead and try to click on this guy, see what it does. Okay, so this is the Department of Justice, the Tribal Affairs Unit. So this is OVW, Office on Violence Against Women. And so this is a great place to start if you are wanting to learn more about resources that are available through the Department of Justice to address victims of crime. So it's domestic violence, family violence, sexual assault, and stalking. And then they are actually implementing missing and murdered Indigenous people. And so this website will provide just information on current programs. Also, it provides information on solicitations that are open. And so it's right here. And they will have all of the grants that are available through the Department of Justice, OVW. And so they are pretty good on rolling out grants annually. They're just now finishing up their cycle for this year. One thing you want to do is sign up for their email alerts. It's right on top of the page, because that will send you an email when a new solicitation comes out. This is free money. So work with your tribes, work with your programs to apply for these grants. Because if you're wanting to develop an idea on how to better serve your tribal community in addressing victims of sexual assault or domestic violence, you could get pretty creative on what that could look like. Now, I will always offer our support as an organization. We want to brainstorm ideas with you, or if you need examples of ideas, we want to partner with you in that process. And so we can be a resource for you. A lot of times these grants, they will, one of the requirements by statute is you partner with either a nonprofit or coalition. And that's specifically to provide technical assistance to you as a program that's applying for a grant. We've done that already with Prairie Band and Iowa Tribe in writing letters of support and offering our assistance both in their applications as they apply for federal dollars. And so we're happy to always sit down and talk out ideas for our support to these tribal communities as they're trying to get valuable resources. So ultimately they could better serve their tribal populations. So yes, sign up for these emails, look through this page because it is a good source of knowledge when it comes to programs that are out there. Now, I will always brag about the OVW team. Their director is Sherry Ann Moore. She is one of our tribal people that has advocated for our tribes within the Department of Justice. If you ever are able to get to a OVW training, Sherry is great to talk with. So please talk with her and just learn more about the great things that are happening for tribes within the Department of Justice. Okay, the second great resource that I want you to write down is the TA to TA. So this one is technical assistance to technical assistance. And so it's just a great kind of database of resources. that are available to tribal communities. It's going to have a lot of articles, publications, information on different topics specific to sexual assault, domestic violence. They work with OVW to provide this resource, and it's a great starting point. And so as you kind of maneuver their website, you could sign up to have your own account, and then you can log in and save your information. Great resources if you're trying to, one, educate yourself or programs within your community, and you just need some information or you want to point somebody to the right direction. On here, they have this awareness tab. And so these are your main topics that are addressed through OVW: your dating violence, domestic violence, sexual assault, and stalking. So if you are trying to acknowledge that April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month, where's a good place to start for information? So this will provide some friendly little things to click through. Let's say I'm trying to engage my tribal police department because I want them to have more information on sexual assault related topics. You can click on this and it brings up publications you could download. And these are specific to law enforcement. So it's nice because when you're speaking to law enforcement, the language that you're using is very different, very important. And I'm speaking from my past experience. I did 3 years working at Tribal PD at Prairie Band. And so, yeah, the language you're using it's different because they're very focused on law and order codes. And so this stuff, this publications is all tailored to the audience. And so you can go through and say resources for advocates. And so, yeah, it's a great little website to kind of go through and find publications that have been put together for you by all of these technical assistance providers. Now, COVID has been impactful for our tribal communities, obviously. And one challenging thing that we've seen is trainings, and how are we supporting our programs with trainings, because we're used to being able to travel and go to these important trainings and learn more. One thing that they've developed a lot more of are webinars. And so the good thing is that there's webinars all the time when it comes to these different topics. And so if you're looking for resources or a specific webinar, if you can't find it on here, let us know, we'll track it down for you. But you can go on their calendars and see how many webinars they have every week. And so once you kind of get on here, you can navigate. So we could know that tomorrow they're doing teen dating violence and social media. And then you could visit these websites of all these technical assistance providers and sign up for their webinars. It makes it pretty handy to kind of go through here and find out what you can sign up for. So yes, like I said, I always look for the websites that I could use and take back with me at these trainings. So this is one that you definitely want to have available. Okay. So April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month. It is one of the big months for our victim services programs across the nation to really engage communities and advocate for not only that awareness, but also really promoting the resources that are available to tribal communities and providing these important services. You'll see national campaigns like the No More campaign, which is really broad and speaking to kind of the national movement of sexual assault responses. And then you'll also see local campaigns. I know Tribal Victim Services at Prairie Band, they always will have a Take Back the Night event, which is a great way to provide a community event for tribal members to address just the impact of sexual assault and really creating that space for our community to have an event for everybody to attend. Now, I know with COVID, it's been a little bit challenging these past couple of years or this past year or so into having these community events. And so one thing I'm really looking forward to is being able to once again have these important events once we get past some of these COVID challenges. And so I always encourage our tribal programs that if they are wanting to get more involved in the community, let's get creative. Let's find ways to engage and provide the education and support and information. And who doesn't love a good community event? In the past, we would see a lot of events that incorporated, you know, educational information or t-shirts promoting their programs, or even just being able to gather as a community in a safe and healthy way. That's an important way to support this conversation, but then also really support the good things that are happening within our communities. We want to be a resource to our tribes when they're doing these events, and we've been active as much as we can with COVID, and offering our support of our staff or any type of building up ideas and figuring out how we can address and support safety during COVID, but then also still get that message out. And so we're always happy to brainstorm or provide some support if you're wanting to do more in your community. Now, with Sexual Assault Awareness Month, you'll see a lot of information that's important, and just the impact of violence within our tribal communities. Now, this information is from 2016 from the NIJ, National Institute of Justice, their research report. It provides a couple of different conversations that should be happening. One, the overwhelming impact of violence within tribal communities. On the left, you see some numbers that are addressing the violence towards women in our tribal communities, and just the overwhelming impact of both domestic violence and then sexual assault. And on the right, it talks about similar information addressing Native men in our communities. We all know, just I'm assuming from our work that we do, that violence is a challenge that our tribal communities face quite often within our families. The impact directly and indirectly has been something that we are needing to address and are wanting to address. And sometimes it could be a process and what that could look like. Some of these conversations that should be happening within our tribes or within our tribal communities and our families are tough conversations just because of just the history that we're really speaking to. And so when you are engaging these tribal communities and really advocating for the safety and wellness, it's an investment of time and resources, but then also speaking from, from personal perspective, just the impact it has to all of our tribal families. It's something that thankfully we're seeing a lot more tribes get more involved in providing resources to address these topics. And that's something that I'm happy to see. Also, this speaks to that ability and an opportunity to acknowledge the men in this process. We can understand and know that we need to have healthy Native American men in our families, in our communities, to really provide that space to address men as survivors and as victims, but then also really acknowledge ways to advocate and support them when they're trying to address some of these tendencies that need to get addressed. I've been excited to see a lot of programs implement like batters intervention programs, which are resources for our justice system to provide that education and support for our Native American men that are being mandated to complete these assessments and intervention programs. I know Prairie Band has developed a BIP program specific to tribal communities, which is great. And that was just a response to wanting to be specific to tribal communities and saying, yes, we can understand and appreciate that there are national models, but we need something specific to tribes. And so Prairie Band was able to develop that and implement it. And it's been a good resource for their community. Now, a shameless plug, which I really want to develop and see more, is how are we using data in our tribal communities? It's very difficult to find information and data for tribal communities that is updated. And so one task that I'm really looking forward to as a program is trying to figure out how we can be more intentional in collecting data, because with all of our grants and all of our resources that our tribes are going after, they're very specific in needing data from the community. And so I see it as an opportunity for our tribes to be better in providing a clearer picture of the challenges that we're facing, the opportunity to grow and to provide better resources. And that starts with being able to best provide that information in these grant solicitations. So I want to see our data get specific to our tribes here in Kansas. I would love to be a part of that conversation and saying, how can we be more intentional in collecting information on how does violence impact Prairie Band, or how does violence impact Sac and Fox or Iowas, so that we can have a better picture of our own tribal communities. So we're not so reliant on the national picture, but intentional and specific to our tribes here in Kansas or our state as a whole, and what it looks like for our survivors. And so I will always be willing to talk with you if you have ideas on engaging our law enforcement or our justice system or our victim services programs and collecting data so that we can be better in sharing that information with our tribes and making sure that we're best representing our communities. Who doesn't love numbers? We need numbers. Numbers are great. Okay, so today is actually National Denim Day. So this kind of speaks to some of the national movements that we see coming across when it comes to supporting survivors and victims, but then also creating a space for conversations. So like Sexual Assault Awareness Month, this is a important kind of movement that's been developed over the years. And so today is Denim Day, and it's in response to a case that happened in Italy in 1992, where an 18-year-old girl was raped by her 47-year-old driving instructor on the first day of her driving class. And so this was a pretty tough case that he actually was convicted of sexual assault, and then actually appealed it to the Italian court system. And they overturned the case because they felt that since she was wearing tight denim jeans, she had to have consented to the sexual assault because she would have had to help pull the jeans off because they were that tight. That's horrible and it's disgusting in every way. And because of that, it really focuses on getting that message that there is no excuses for sexual assaults. And it really created this movement in response to the Italian court system that really grew from there into like a national campaign of Denim Day. And so you'll see a lot of people posting about being intentional and wearing denim today to support this movement and this conversation that happens, that there is no excuse for sexual assaults, especially when the Italian courts, they justified assault essentially when it came to the actions of this man. And so conversation like this, like I said, it's tough to have, but it's important to really understand the intention behind these movements, and knowing that a lot of these situations that we see, it's hard to talk about and it's hard to even imagine. But you are seeing a lot of similarities to some of the things that our tribal communities have faced, some of these challenges when it comes to victim blaming, when it comes to our court systems not being as effective or thorough as they could be, or just the mindset of how we approach our services, and always needing to believe our survivors or our victims when they're sharing their stories with us. How are we best honoring that relationship? How are we best advocating for their voices when they're sharing these tough personal situations with us. And so um, as we grow as an organization, we hope to really support these movements that our tribes are doing to get this information out there. We're hoping to really advocate and be a part of these national conversations and supporting important movements like Denim Day or Sexual Assault Awareness Month. And so it's an opportunity for us to be proactive in engaging our communities and saying that this is something that's very real. And it's not just limited to Italy, but what does it look like in our tribal communities? What does it look like inside of Kansas? So you will see, and I know that you've all have probably seen the conversation of missing and murdered Indigenous women. This has been a push as of late that's been really getting momentum when it comes to addressing. Oh, I don't know what happened there. Let's go back out. Addressing missing and murdered when it comes to our tribal communities. It's been a national conversation. And so there's been programs that have been implemented. The previous administration actually pushed for the Operation Lady Justice, which started this conversation at the systems level when it came to how is the federal government addressing or supporting responses that are adequate in addressing just this topic that's happening across our tribal communities. Operation Lady Justice has been and continues to evolve as our current administration is really taking up that ball and running with it. And so we're excited to see they're actually having a listening session, I think next week, on this project and how they hope to develop it and grow it. But then also get feedback from tribes when it comes to how can they be better in being specific to engage tribes and to support the responses that are happening within our tribal communities, but then also really advocating for that partnership between federal government and tribal governments. So you will see a lot more information when it comes to Operation Lady Justice. One cool thing that we're seeing too is our tribes running with the ideas. So Prairie Band has a MMIW Awareness Day. They're actually gathering and doing an event at their old bingo hall. And so you'll see tribes implementing these national movements to be specific to their own tribal communities. I know our organization has reached out and we plan on being there just to show our support and be a resource for them however they need us. And so we're always happy to support whatever's going on in our tribal communities. So if you have something going on in your area that you might need a couple extra hands for or some support, we are happy to come out and support you guys, just really to celebrate the good work y'all are doing, but be a resource for this movement. So missing and murdered Indigenous women. Now, we also saw Kansas actually have a bill signed by the governor that was put in by Representative Victors, which is a great starting point. It spoke to the need to develop training for MMIW for a lot of our justice system responses. And so we're excited to see what that turns into. We're seeing a lot more states really develop that similar type of approach to where they can have resources for our law enforcement or our courts to be more intentional when it comes to engaging MMIW in our tribal communities. We hope that this movement will grow and we'll advocate for that so that we could be more intentional and specific at how we're addressing MMIW with our tribal responses and what they look like for our tribal communities. There's resources that are needed. Since this is a momentum that's been gaining a lot of speed, we are expecting and hoping to see resources that are rolled out from the Department of Justice to our tribal communities so that we can be specific in developing resources and projects and programs for MMIW for our tribes. And so once that happens, we will be engaging our tribes to make sure that they're aware of these resources and ways to develop and grow support for our tribal communities. Okay, so this is kind of the end of my little presentation. That's my contact information as executive director, my email, and then Corinne Lang as our membership and outreach manager. Like I said before, we are a resource for you and your community. We want to support the great things y'all are doing when addressing survivors and victims in your area. We provide just our perspective of our professional experience, I guess, in doing advocacy work or court work. And so, yeah, we want to be able to see our tribal communities have the support and resources they need to honor our commitment to our survivors. There's always opportunity to grow and to develop new projects and components. And the great thing is that there's a lot of sources that are out there when it comes to training, when it comes to identifying and going after grant dollars. There's ways that we can develop our ideas and do more. And so we want to be a resource for you. And like I said, if we can't find an answer for you, we will track one down. Even basic things as in the past, we've had one of our tribes have questions when it comes to grant reports for OVW. And it's been a little tricky because we have a new system. I don't know how many of y'all have had to deal with like just grants. It's amazing. But in finding answers, sometimes it's a little bit tough. And so we've had tribes reach out and we've been able to track down some information, just really trying to be that resource to advocate within our systems, but then also to advocate with the Department of Justice and figure out how we could better serve our tribal people. So yeah, that's about it. If you have any questions, feel free to send me an email or Corey an email. We want to be intentional, and we want to be we want to be a support for the work that y'all do. So, yeah.
Wow, that was great, Daniel. That was a wonderful overview and digging into some of the current issues a little bit. We really appreciate that. And we definitely want to hear more from you and your staff. I'm wondering if you have time for a few questions.
Yeah, we're always happy to hang out.
Who would like to go first?
I'll jump in and go first. Hi, Daniel. This is Elizabeth Berger at the Sunflower Foundation. Thank you so much. I learned so much in your presentation. I'm still trying to process the Denim Day origin, and wow. Anyway, we are a health-based philanthropy, and I am interested in where do you see the gaps in funding for this type of work? As you said, there is federal funding to help and partner with tribes, but are there specific activities, processes, people, etc., that would help advance this work that federal funding typically doesn't pay for?
Okay, so that's a great and loaded question.
Oh no, it's not a trick question, I promise.
No, but it's a conversation that we should be having. And I'm speaking from my perspective, from our organization now as a technical assistance provider, but then also from my experience of doing direct services and running a program, but then also having to write grants for direct services. And you have to get creative sometimes because there are limitations when it comes to funding and what you can and can't do, especially with the Department of Justice. One thing that always stuck out to me, and I argue with it to this day, is for whatever reason, the Department of Justice will not fund prevention efforts. So they do not like the word prevention. And for us, back in the day when I was running a program, we had to be intentional to not use prevention. We can have community outreach, we can have resources to provide education, but we cannot do prevention efforts. And it always kind of just bothered me because there has to be an investment to the community. especially within our tribal communities, and being able to build those relationships and have that constant message of how can we prevent this type of abuse from happening in the future. And so I still see some tribes kind of struggling with what it looks like to provide that level of outreach in prevention, and working with and engaging tribal communities to have that piece of really trying to break that cycle. And so prevention measures, education, outreach type efforts, I always think we could do better. And so making sure that we are being really intentional in, one, getting creative in finding resources, but then also understanding our limitations. One thing I struggle with in recognizing some of the names on this call is, with our grant dollars, we can't have food. We can't pay for food. And it blows my mind, because that's one of the best times for a lot of our families, is being able to gather and eat, bring a dish bag because we're gonna have a potluck. But our grant dollars don't provide food. And it sounds very basic, but in our tribal communities, being able to have a potluck, being able to, and I saw Jess's comment, yes, food is a struggle for us. We would have to get creative and find donations and find programs that can buy food, or find ways to have healthy food from diabetes prevention. But for whatever reason, our grant dollars do not support food. So yeah, that's always been a challenge, is food, prevention efforts. Yeah, that's probably kind of a starting point. Beyond that, yeah, I'll definitely keep that in mind. And I've heard a lot of good work coming from the Sunflower organization. So yeah, I can appreciate the work y'all do.
Well, thank you. And you answered the question really well. A very quick follow-up. It doesn't seem like it would be, but just to make sure, there is no, it would not jeopardize any federal funding coming in for their prescribed activities to receive external funding to supplement it, such as the healthy food prevention workshop.
Challenge when it comes to accepting donations of types of food. And so, yeah, I would definitely engage our tribal programs, or if you were to say, hey, Daniel, keep me in mind if you hear about this need, let me know. And really figuring out how best each program wants to address donations and food. But I wouldn't expect there to be very much challenge when it comes to supporting the efforts of these great programs and holding these events.
Does anyone else have another question? I only have 5. I guess one thing that, well, I guess there are no quick answers. When your program identifies a need for a safe house, what do you do?
So we do not do direct services. And so when it comes to needing a resource for a survivor or victim, we will refer to the programs that do have resources. Now, most of our programs, they do have resources within their grants for emergency housing needs or emergency shelter. And a lot of times they'll implement like a project that will put them up in a hotel on an emergency basis. We would love to get to the point to where we are thinking more long-term when it comes to what that could look like. There are no specific tribal shelters in place in Kansas. And if the tribes are wanting to see that, then we want to help facilitate that conversation and support that effort, because it definitely is an opportunity to grow and to have a larger picture. And so, yeah, we would refer any type of survivor or victim needing direct assistance to these programs. A lot of that initial response would be based upon their location. Now, the great thing is that, yes, our tribal programs are providing advocacy services to their communities, but there are other resources that might be helpful too. And so you see a lot of tribes partnering up with state programs. So like the, my mind is going blank, KCSDV, the state organization might partner up with the YWCA, or you might see like a tribal program partner with the Y, because they do have shelter services available if they could get their clients qualified.
Thank you. Anybody else have a thought about a question? Can you give us a thumbnail on the extent to which we need to be worried about sex trafficking in between, let's say, I-70 and I-36 or US 36?
It's one of those. It's hard to ignore. It's hard to ignore the major highways that are coming through our state. And it kind of goes back to that conversation of how are we identifying the need? And that's a challenge for our tribes when it comes to one, addressing our justice system, when it comes to making those arrests, figuring out how to best prosecute those within our tribes. And there's some jurisdictional issues there. There's no definitive answer to say this is how bad it is within our tribal communities, because we just don't have the resources to identify that type of specific information. You'll see tribal programs address cases here and there when it comes to concerns of human trafficking or sexual assault. A lot of times you'll see those two issues kind of being combined, is human trafficking and sexual assault. So how are we best identifying these cases and understanding some of the bigger picture of, yes, they might be sexual assault survivors and might have been sexual assault, but what are the other things that are happening? Is there some level of coercion? Is there some level of influence when it comes to, were they being trafficked? Were they being used as sexual traffic? And so, yeah, there is no definitive answer or information when it comes to how bad it is within Kansas. And that kind of goes back to me wanting to figure out how we could engage our tribes, our justice systems, to get that data going so that we could be more intentional in our responses.
Thank you. Anyone else? I know you must have questions. Then does your organization do any education around the issues of gender identity?
So we are seeing a lot more information when it comes to the LGBTQ community and being able to, one, acknowledge and be present in that conversation, which is a great resource for our tribes. We are waiting to see what that will look like when it comes to resources for our tribal communities, to be specific in providing those responses. In the past, I've seen a lot of programs implement resources for that community, which is great. There is an education piece that has to come with that. And it's something that I'm hoping to see more of, because the two biggest topics we're seeing a lot more when it comes to the system-based responses are MMIW and the LGBTQ community. And so, yeah, it's definitely an opportunity to grow. And once we start seeing more resources and education information, then we hope to roll that out. Now, if I were to have a tribe get a hold of us and say, hey, Daniel, we need training specific to how can we best serve a LGBTQ client that comes in and reports a sexual assault. If that's something that we can't provide them, then I have the resources to where we could bring in trainers to provide that level of support and resources for that program. So yeah, we want to be able to tailor our responses and our resources for our programs and our tribes. So yeah, if that's a concern and you want to find more information, let us know. And if we can't find it, then we'll bring it in.
Great. Does anyone else have anything else they would like to ask or say? We are 5 minutes from adjournment time here. Last chance.
I do. I have a question. My question is, you've mentioned a couple of times that there's a gap in the data, and that we're not collecting data. So how do you envision that challenge being solved, I guess?
I say plenty of Dr. Pepper. That's it's going to be a challenge because I just speaking from my personal experience of working within tribes, and it's nice to hear Eunice. But yeah, speaking from my personal experience is we're bad about sharing information when it comes to programs already, and let alone sharing information with other tribes. And so I think one part of our program is being a coalition and figuring out how we could best bring all of these voices to a table so that we're being intentional in collecting this information, but then also really advocating for the benefit of sharing that information. So that when we do have questions or wanting to know more about what's the sex trafficking look like in Kansas, we have that data from each tribal community to be able to say, hey, this is what it looks like for us, but then also provide that bigger picture of this is what it looks like for our tribal communities as a whole. So yes, we want to be intentional in providing that space for our tribes to come together and provide that information and really figure out how best to go about it, because that's something that it's not specific to Kansas, it's all of our tribes nationally, is that information is just not there. That's why we're seeing, the most recent data from NIJ is from 2016, because that information is just not there. Miss, I will buy you lunch if you have a really better answer than I said. So yeah, I will buy you lunch. We can talk it out.
That must have been the jackpot question, Miss.
Yeah, but it's a good question. It's a good question because it's a problem that we're seeing is how are we able to think in a bigger picture and provide a more comprehensive understanding of challenges we're facing. And that's something that we just have to figure out what looks best for our tribes and for our state.
Well, I mean, it seems like, I don't know. I'm just hypothesizing here that the processes are already in place to collect the data. It's the actual system of which data points do we want, who's going to collect it, those kinds of more logistical things are what the gap is, right? Not we already have people that are providing services, or we have PD departments, we have social services departments, so they're already collecting some data, even if it's just qualitative. It's just kind of, what are they doing with that? Is that kind of where, is that kind of what the gap is? It's not as big of a chasm as we might think, right?
I would, yes, you're correct. It's good that a lot of our programs and our law enforcement, they do have data that can be accessed. And I agree that there is some level of understanding the intention behind collecting all that information. I can speak from personal experiences. There are some challenges when you start trying to collect data like that, because there is some restrictions of grant funds, or if you're law enforcement, there's some confidentiality and privacy information. And so if you're collecting numbers, yes, it's easier to kind of get around some of those challenges. But it's really getting into a process of regularly collecting that data so that we can be intentional in managing that information. So yes, I agree. It should be easier than what it is, but it is something that we just don't see very often. Is our tribal programs sharing that information?
So I guess how do we become the pioneers of doing that, right? We're the trailblazers.
Well, you could join
Say-
the Tribal Health Summit Planning Committee. Meets monthly, and I can tell you that data comes up all the time. The need for it on the one hand, and how do we protect it so it's not misused on the other hand. So we would love to add you to our list. We typically meet the third Monday of every month from 2 to 4, currently, of course, via Zoom. Sometimes that will have to get shifted a little bit depending on holidays, etc. But you are welcome. And I'm sure that you, if there are just 3 of you, I'm sure you're very busy, Daniel, but you and or your staff are welcome to join us. And so I would like to thank Daniel. This has been an extremely valuable, worthwhile discussion. The first of many, I hope. Tiffany, thank you for getting in touch with Daniel and setting this up for us. And thank all of you who were able to join us. And let's see, what is the date of our meeting? Is it the 20th?
May 17th
Is it the 17th? Yeah, the
for
third.
Tribal House Summit. And then that's the third Monday. And then May 26th will be our next webinar.
Thank you. And we are beginning the planning for our August summit now. So if you would like to have, take part in that, please join us.
Yep.
Thank
Shoot me
you
your
all.
email so that way I can get you guys on our
Yeah.
on my little email list. And I do have to draw for 2 gift cards. So I'm going to turn my little camera around.
Oh. Well, I will excuse myself from the gift card drawing.
Can you guys see that? So that way you know I'm not cheating.
Oh, cute.
So that way I'm not just picking myself. Karen is the first one.
Karen, okay. I think Karen had to go back to work.
Yeah, and she's just down the hall, so I can get her. And Jessica Wheeler. Thank you.
Oh, great.
Jessica's just down the hall too. Yay.
Oh, sweet. Okay. All right. Wish you well. No thunderstorms today. Thanks.
Not yet.
I'll be in touch.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Tiffany.
Yeah, thank you, Daniel.